In the beginning, when man was but an infantile race of savages, they still had the same burning desires that we are plagued with today. Hunger, libido, violence, yearning for acceptance. But the most graceful of which, the compulsion of storytelling. They painted on cave walls with charcoal and pigment. While incredibly limited, there is a beauty in the simple illustrations and raw subject matters. Humanity would continue to hone this craft. Fast forward to 1930, and sequential art is born with strip comics alongside the printing press. The term sequential art being coined in 1985 by comic artist Will Eisner in his book Comic Books and Sequential Art. This practice is best known through the various mediums therein. Comic books, graphic novels, comic strips, manga, children's books, storyboards, and some might even argue in animation, but that's a whole story of its own. With the dawn of the internet came with it a whole new avenue of freedom. A giant web where anything posted can be accessed across the globe. And it is here where we reach webcomics. You might know a few, some infamous for being amateurish. But amateurish or not, there is still potential to move millions with these stories made by independent creators. So now comes the subject matter of this video, with the rise of the smartphone's prominence, and a little app called Webtoon. Long story short, Webtoon is what you get when the manga industry and YouTube have a baby on a smartphone app. This model was invented in 2004 and then made global in 2014 with major rehauls. Webtoons are a type of digital comic that originated in South Korea. While some of you may know them as manhwa, the term for Korean cartoon or comic, the new identity of Webtoon comes from the website and phone app that hosts comics online. Also, not every Webtoon is from Korea, making this distinction all the more important. These aren't stories being printed in magazines and then being scanned online after the fact. They're made for internet use primarily, and phones more specifically. This has resulted in many comics creating a unique flowing style. The language of flow in manga and comic books are almost identical barring the right to left, left to right difference. But for Webtoons, there is no page turning. There is only scrolling. Illustrations can extend far beyond a page, or in this case a single screen's length, similar to double page spreads, but they can easily be made far larger because there is no physical border restricting the artist. Some comics even use a bit of animation in their illustrations. Here's a couple examples from a comic called Room of Swords. I find it works well with the text, but it's a hit or miss in other places. This is very rare, but it's an example of a strength exclusive to a digital art. It's a potential for animation and sequential art to meet somewhere in the middle, and it's not an unpleasant possibility. The popularity of manhwa rose outside of Korea with the prominence of anime and manga, and they do overlap in appeal. Naturally, this is due to manga's influence on manhwa, and just sequential art in general. But the prominence of manhwa isn't anywhere close to that of manga today. However, seeing how a few manhwa are getting anime adaptations now, the most high profile in recent memory being The God of High School, the popularity of manhwa and webtoon will likely only continue to grow outside of Asia. This growth in popularity makes me curious about the future of sequential art. The digital age has been making many traditional products obsolete in favor of online alternatives. We can't forget how Netflix killed Blockbuster, so I kinda want to speculate if a webtoon format could become as popular or more popular than manga and comic books 100 years from now or something, if I'm even capable of such a task. So the first thing to acknowledge is that unlike Blockbuster, manga and comic books have made a very comfortable and seamless transition into the digital age. Swiping left to right is as common as scrolling up and down, and I'd argue some series look better digital, such as Murata's redraw of One Punch Man. Another thing to consider is the act of sharing a work across social media. You know when you want to screenshot a cool webtoon pic, but it's too damn tall, so you gotta zoom out with one hand and screenshot with the other? And once you're done, the app tells you to stop pirating because it's bad? Well, manga and comics come with none of that baggage. That doesn't sound like a lot, but the ease of getting your screenshot may determine how often you choose to take one, and how often you choose to share. Now there's one way I think Webtoon has manga and comics beat when it comes to longevity, and that's business model. See, the Webtoon app is constructed a lot less like Marvel Comics or Shonen Jump, and more like YouTube. It's even got a like system and everything. Far as I can tell, the barrier to entry isn't dauntingly high. meaning any artist who draws on the side or who can't get a job in traditional companies are likely to gravitate towards independent webcomics or to a Webtoon format. Even a couple artists I found through Twitter ended up having Webtoon series to my surprise. If you want to learn more about the process of becoming a Webtoon artist, Webtoon's official YouTube channel has videos going through the process step by step. YouTube is largely a successful business model because the sheer quantity of content keeps it relevant next to everything else, with only the creators beyond a certain threshold of popularity earning revenue. The series that have this success are dubbed Webtoon Originals. According to the numbers I found on the app itself, there are almost 400 ongoing weekly Webtoon Originals and 282 completed Webtoon Originals, with the amount of total series being hosted exclusively on the app being approximately 2,600. In stark contrast, a physical magazine like Shonen Jump has to be very strict on what series they decide to run. Beyond just having a finite amount of series at a time, they are also quick to axe anything that underperforms, to the point that rushed endings aren't an uncommon occurrence throughout the manga industry, as many magazines follow this motto. They try to keep a strong brand of guaranteed quality over quantity. With comic books, I'm far from an expert, I don't know a whole lot, but I'll just flash some information here to see how that turns out.
When I unbend it, if I try to unbend the page, right, like that, if I try to fix it, then I close the book, what the f?
Although Webtoon is still young in comparison to manga and comic books, it does have a sizable backlog. Unfortunately, this backlog of completed works are locked behind the daily pass system. Now, if you're anything like me, you love binging and burning through a series to completion before moving on to the next one. However, the daily pass system limits your engagement to completed works by locking most of its episodes, and asking you to spend a daily pass to unlock the next episode. You get 3 or maybe 5 a day depending on the length of the series, but it's not comfortable to be restricted like that. Obviously, this is done to make sure people come back to the app day after day to read through what they can. And to be fair, each series has a separate daily pass system, so you could theoretically be reading through dozens and dozens of chapters a day across multiple series on a daily pass alone. But I like to binge, and me no like that. You can really only binge the ongoing works, and that means you're eventually gonna have to stop and wait for the next episode to come out. It's a shame too, because there are some amazing works in the backlog, some of which I'll talk about at the end of the video where I just recommend series to you. Although this daily pass system is much cheaper and more lenient than the official company apps of Viz and Marvel, which require payment for all of their series, with maybe a handful of free ones on the side, or in Viz's case, just the most recent chapters of ongoing works are free to read. But hey, you can always pirate on illegal sites and then buy a volume later to keep yourself from feeling guilty! Yo! There's also another way Webtoon is like YouTube, and that is in its transformative use of characters. You got Squid Game Romance, a slice-of-life Batman family comic, and my personal favorite, a comedy-turned-horror-turned-shonen-esque battle series starring Shaggy and Scooby-Doo alongside other cartoon characters. I couldn't find any transformative fanfic-esque works that are dubbed Webtoon Originals, even though Scoop and Shag has more likes and follows than some Webtoon Originals. So it seems that their transformative nature can possibly keep the creator from earning revenue, but I don't know for sure. Some series also include optional music for specific chapters. I find that the tracks used are very generic and very quick to loop. I'm confident calling most of it stock audio. But this outcome is almost inevitable considering they can't perfectly match a track to every viewer's reading pace. You don't exactly have as much control as you would like in a movie or an anime. It can only serve to boost the general mood of a scene. Also, its inconsistency in its use in most series can make it feel tacky, as if the author is screaming, "This is the chapter where things get emotional." Although one series does stick out as being better in this regard. Siren's Lament not only has a very large selection of original music, but most chapters are accompanied by a track making it feel more integrated. The music itself is also pretty listenable, and it's the only series I consistently want to play as I read. It's mostly made up of melancholic piano pieces, but there is some lighthearted tracks for the more carefree chapters. It still runs the problem of not matching the reader's pace. I tend to finish chapters long before the song ends, but I don't have it in me to say it was a bad or frivolous inclusion. It's also the only one I know of to have an album release, so I'll attribute this case to the power of effort and creativity. Good job, Kenny Comics, you got the best music on this whole darn reading app. Oh, to be clear, Kenny Comics isn't the one who made the comic. Instant Miso is the author of the comic, not Kenny Comics. Kenny Comics is an indie musician, capiche? Although there's a second, more pressing problem with music on Webtoon. At least for me specifically. If I want to listen to music while I read, I feel more inclined to pick my own music that I believe suits the series. I'm always plugged into my music, so it's a habit I have. However, there can be a purpose for this function outside of music. In a series called Lookism, there's an arc that takes place inside of a dance club. The music is as forgettable and bland as ever, but in this example, the club music is diegetic, meaning it really didn't have to match with my pace or with the action, because I can assume that the DJ is just going to do his job regardless of what the characters do. It might be more effective to have diegetic sounds like city sounds or rain ambience instead of a forgettable or unpleasant track. I think there's something there, maybe. Even if only a little. I mean, if you're gonna have the function anyway, might as well find as many ways to use it as possible. Now let's talk about merchandise, baby! Now, even though I experience most manga, webtoon, and comics on my phone, physical copies can be a great way to not only support a series,
I'm doing my part,
but also be pleasant on its own. Even though I could go online and read all 1,000 chapters of One Piece, having a physical copy on my shelf to read and share with others is nice. Now, at first I was completely unsure as to how a webtoon could translate its panel composition into physical book form. It's true that a lot of webtoons don't really try for the big, long, flowing pages that are exclusive to webtoon, but for the ones that do, they tend to be the most successful and the ones that get a physical release. Pictures meant to be revealed scrolling downward would definitely have to be handled carefully in transition. To investigate myself, I bought a physical copy of Lore Olympus Volume 1, which happens to be the most popular webtoon and one of my favorites. I would have done the macho manly thing and gotten the boxer, but it was a limited release and costs twice as much. But romance is nice too, and Hades is a lovable dork in this book. So let's take a look. Reading through the book, the first thing I noticed was how barren some pages looked. Now, it's definitely true that there's a lot of blank spaces in an average webtoon, but because the pictures only have to fill out your phone, it's not very noticeable. Thankfully, most of these pages were in the beginning of the book, almost making me feel like they started with one approach, but after a couple chapters they found their bearings. They even found ways to use the negative space with particular images about as effectively as the webtoon did. Which also brings me to the second thing I noticed, which is how some panels and images were changed to fit into book form. Like this picture of Cerberus was flipped to make it an effective page turn. Or this one image of Hades had its background removed and its size shrunk. Outside of the obvious change of placement, there's some small tweaks here and there all around, like the movement of speech bubbles and such. This tells me there was some real thought put towards adapting this into book form. These kind of decisions are sensible ones, and I can't say they negatively impacted my experience. I probably wouldn't have even noticed if I wasn't doing a side-by-side comparison. But one thing I do feel is a shame is how some illustrations were removed, or more accurately obscured. Like this one nice landscape of hell was barely noticeable underneath all of these panels. It's not that it doesn't work well as a backdrop, but I like the illustration, and you don't get to fully appreciate it in this context. At the same time, other panels that may have been smaller blown up to give them more effect. And lastly, of course, the pages aren't big enough to get that full illustrations of those long, flowing pages. But seeing how their length are usually made for flow and pacing purposes, it's not exactly a terrible loss as long as the most important bits are given proper focus. And sadly, sometimes that's just not the case. Like this page of Eros had to crop out half the wings and most of the beautiful sky to fit into the page. Or how the amazing effect of Kronos swallowing Hades is diminished by breaking up the page into several panels. I certainly wouldn't have minded a bit of blank space on the side to fit the full illustrations in because I like them, they're good, and I'd like to see them in all their glory. It's definitely not the same experience, and I'd argue a slightly worse one when you get down to it. But I'd honestly say it was a mostly successful transition, especially when you consider the difficulties in place. And the bonus chapter was also very nice, it made it worth buying to me, honestly. Finally, the pedantic plot hole seekers will know where Hades got that darn fur coat. Lore Olympus might look pretty good in physical, but after seeing all the work it had to do to fit book form, I can't imagine an action series making this transition as gracefully. Because in action series, the intended flow is more important and arguably their primary selling point. Lore Olympus can get away with plainer paneling because it doesn't have high intensity all the time, whereas you can't really afford to pull back for a blood-pumping fight scene that will last several chapters. Would I recommend buying physical copies? Well, if you like collecting stuff or if you're really a fan of a particular work, go for it. And it's good to keep in mind that physical Webtoon releases are still few in number, and I can only imagine them getting better in the future as they make more of them. Now, will Webtoon take over manga in 2100, or is it just a big fad?
Future's now, old man.
Well, I can't see the future, but while I can't see this type of model thriving, I can't imagine it overtaking the other models completely. As mentioned before, manga and comics of all kinds seamlessly transitioned into online spaces, and have less difficulties in areas like physical distribution and just the sheer scale of the industry being such a good support. Sure, Webtoon has a large volume of series compared to a single magazine, and its creator system does give it room for steady growth, but they still pale in comparison to overhead companies like Shueisha and Marvel. If I'm wrong and Webtoon is going to be the future, it's going to be playing catch up for a very long time, and arguably only to the point that it can match the other industries. On the subject of flow, while I do think the long downwards flowing can look really cool in Webtoon, sadly not every series attempts this, and in a way that's understandable. It's like figuring out a new language of expression and not everyone is up for it. Some series even opt for a comic strip style, which for short gag comics is just as appropriate on your smartphone today as it was decades ago in newspapers. I don't want to shame a series for not using this particular style if it doesn't suit the works and the creator's priorities. I like to think that with time there will be creative innovations on the app, but I'm not sure how far they can take it. I may be a layman in this regard, but right to left flow just appears to have more versatility to it. I don't know, man, I'm just some goof on YouTube, but there are some nice stories on this app, so let me introduce you to a few of my favorites. The God of High School may be the most well known as it's one of the few with an animated adaptation. The anime is decently put together head to toe, but if you don't want to wait for season 2, God of High School has about 400 unadapted episodes to binge. If you love battle shonen like Naruto, Dragon Ball, One Piece, then God of High School is the perfect recommendation for you. The series isn't shy about its inspirations, and in fact its narrative themes feel like an iteration of some of Dragon Balls and One Pieces, as power levels are introduced only to immediately be drawn into question. It also goes way deeper into the morality of creating disposable shadow clones than I ever thought possible. I thought started in with a gag of, I am alive and not a Naruto filler arc, but it became a very interesting subplot for a few reasons, none of which I want to spoil here. Its action is arguably the tightest of any webtoon as it takes full advantage of the unique flowing style, and then some. It's currently on hiatus, leaving off right before what fans believe to be the final battle that will end the series. I want to think it'll be over by the time a newbie can catch up, but knowing how fast some of you nerds can read, I don't think that is the case. As of February 3rd, God of High School is no longer on hiatus. This stockpiling like 30 videos and not releasing them for months was a mistake. It was a mistake. I'm gonna have to put like a billion caveats in all of these videos. Regardless, it's a great action series and a definite must-read if you're interested in webtoons in general. But I wouldn't say it's my favorite action series. That praise is saved for Lookism. Lookism is an action series much more grounded than God of High School. Grounded is in quotations because even though its action centers street fights, it's still full of crazy and impossibly athletic, cute boys with extreme personalities who eventually get Kuroko no Basketball-esque flashy eyes, with some sci-fi or supernatural elements at play that we don't fully understand at this point. Its premise is a simple one that was definitely made to be wish fulfillment in no small capacity, with a virgin loser who inexplicably finds a handsome athletic body that he can swap into. The story swings between slice of life high school hijinks to sinister gang warfare. I think it comments on the nature versus nurture or hard work versus talent in a much more interesting way than God of High School, and most works in general, as its more grounded setting allows it to explore talent in forms outside of fighting ability, such as being born with wealth or connections, or even just being born attractive. This definitely isn't a picturesque work. It puts far more emphasis on being kinetic, aside from a few illustrations and whenever a cute boy needs to be drawn especially sexy. I find most of the cast to be very lovable, no doubt thanks to the slice of life episodes, and that allows it to tug on my heartstrings more frequently than God of High School. But you should know, action series are not the highest performers on Webtoon, at least not anymore. Drama and romance series are typically found in the top performing sections and in the top daily sections. They frequently compete with God of High School despite some of them being only a fraction of its length. Oh, also I forgot to mention something pretty important. The Webtoon reader demographic is mostly female, because in the early days they focused mostly on drama and romance, with God of High School's sudden popularity taking over for a time before receding again. So next I'll recommend 2 romance series I really enjoyed. The first of which we talked about earlier, Lore Olympus, the #1 performing series on Webtoon. A soap opera-esque take on the Greek gods and their dynamics, following the spring goddess Persephone and her newfound relationship with the lord of the underworld Hades. The story is beautifully depicted in a highly stylized digital paint art style, a style that can range from adorable to abstract to unsettling. I've heard many describe Lore Olympus as Tumblr-esque, and that definitely seems accurate. There are themes of sexual abuse, and there are even warnings on the chapters that they pop up in. And it does go to some dark places, don't get me wrong, but I do find it hilarious when I'm warned about the upsetting contents of a chapter only to see nothing more than a bit of gaslighting. It's just a little funny. It's still an amazing series. The only negative thing I have to say is that it peaked early on with the scene of Hermes sliding over a car hood. It's all downhill from there. With a strong ongoing story and whispers of a television series in production, now might be the perfect time to get in on the Olympus train. Edith is a more grounded romance following the titular Edith and her budding relationship with an aspiring actor named Philip. One thing that always draws me into a romance is not only when there are external forces threatening a relationship, but internal ones as well. It's cute, it's soft, but it can hit hard when it most needs to. Loving Reaper is an adorably sad series. If you're an animal lover looking for a tearjerker, this episodic series was made for you. Reaper showcases the numerous ways animal abuse exists, and if you read it, it may convince you to carry yourself with a bit more empathy for them. It even adds directions and links to multiple charities and fundraisers at the end of each chapter. That's pretty cool. Scoob and Shag is still the craziest thing on the planet today, and you should read it, bro. It's a freaking battle shonen with Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, and it's actually good. Like, it's actually good. That's what blows my mind. Like, it's everything I want from an action series, but, you know, it's like a transformative work with all these characters. Like, it's Tails gets trolled, but part 2. The works of the author J.H. are definitely a highlight among Webtoon, with the short but ever so gripping horizon having one of the most explosive payoffs to anything ever. Like, it's so sad, it's so depressing, and it's on the daily pass system, which sucks, but I liked it a lot. And that final chapter with... and it was just so emotional, I almost cried. I love that page. I love that page. He's definitely one of the strongest illustrators on the whole app. Mosquito Awards is a fun, cheesy sci-fi post-apocalyptic war story with lovable leads and a good sense of humor. And my favorite of their works, the ongoing The Boxer, which has incredibly strong character writing, heart-pounding action, and a rather unique order of events for a sports narrative. Check this one out, it's a real good one. Hope you guys check some of this stuff out because it's cool and we can all enjoy cool things, whether it's a manga, a comic book, a Broadway musical, or a phone comic. Thank you all for watching. Like, sub, you know the drill.